Good evening and welcome. I would now like to call the December 19th, 2023 Longmont City Council regular session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel. It also can be viewed at longmontpublicmedia.org/watch or on Comcast channels 8 or 880. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Peck.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo-Ferring. Here. Councilmember Martin. Here. McCoy. Present. Rodriguez. Here. Yarbrough. Here. Christ. Present. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
She wasn't in there, so I had to.
As a reminder to the public, each speaker is limited to 3 minutes and one person may not give or assign their time to others on public invited to be heard. Only Longmont residents and employees of the city of Longmont may speak during the first call public invited to be heard, which is item 8, and they must sign up on the list prior to the meeting. Anyone may speak, and no sign-up is required to speak during final call public invited to be heard. We have minutes to approve. Can I have a motion for the December 5th? It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Christ. Is there any discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Now we have agenda revisions and submissions of documents, motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas. Do we have any agenda items, or I'm sorry, revisions?
We do not have any revisions or new documents.
Thank you. Do any councilors have anything they want to add to a future agenda? I do. I would like to move to direct staff to hold an executive session to discuss a strategy, an exit strategy from the fast tracks portion of the RTD district. So I made that motion. It was seconded by Councilor McCoy. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. That passes unanimously. City Manager, your report?
No report, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. We do have one presentation. It's the Longmont Public Media Quarterly Update. Is Sergio Angeles here? Sergio.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sergio Angeles. I'm the Executive Director for Longmont Public Media. I'm here tonight to give you an update on Q3 and what we've been up to. So we'll just focus tonight on Q3 data as well as Q3 updates. So let's get into data. So we ended Q3 with 150 total paying memberships and 331 free memberships. So a little under 500 memberships for up to Q3. Q3 membership revenue grew to just a little under $11,000. That's most that Longmont Public Media has made from membership revenue since we started. We ended Q3 with just a little under 25,000. So that's now more than what we did in 2022. As of today, we've made about $33,000 in membership revenue. In regards to space usage, so Q1, Q2, and Q3, we have just a little under 2,200 hours, which is just a little bit shy of what we did last year. Again, this is taken into account by aggregating all the reservations that people have made on our reservation system. Doesn't take into account any walk-ins or anything like that. So we are expecting to obviously increase and surpass what we did in 2022. In terms of total hours watched, so Q1, Q2, and Q3, people have watched a total of 4,451 hours on Longmont Public Media. So that's our YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, Roku, and our website. Not included is Comcast cable channels. We still cannot get data from them. And also not included is any City of Longmont viewership and data. And the total hours watched of all time, so since we started in January of 2022, is 31,605 hours. So now let's talk about some of the most popular videos, so top 5 in Q3 alone. First was Rollins Pass Road, Needles Eye, Moffett Tunnel. This was a video that was submitted by the Longmont Senior Video Club. Second was Nepali Jatra 2023, the Soundpost Sessions with Alexa Wildish. I don't know if anyone's been watching The Voice, but Alexa Wildish made it to The Voice, and she performed here in Longmont before she went on there. A little fun fact. Then we had Artists of Longmont, episode number 2, and then Persian Classical Music Night. The most liked videos in Q3, very similar to the most watched. So again, Rollins Pass, Artists of Longmont, Nepali Jatra, Soundpost Session, and then a video that I made with a friend of mine to find the best Mexican restaurant in town. In terms of the most disliked videos, again, this is just coming from YouTube. All we know is that they were disliked. We don't know why. The first one there was the Candid video that we produced for Steve Altschuler. That had 3 dislikes. Terry Goons had 2 dislikes. And that, again, was just Q3. I won't go over the whole list, but this is some of the new shows that were produced and are broadcast at Longmont Public Media just for Q3. We continue to try to diversify and get as much local content or locally produced content as possible. Some other viewerships and metrics. So we had a total users or viewers of just a little under 30,000. Total impressions of 223,000. The average percentage of a video that an LPM viewer watches per views, about 9%. And the average view duration is 2 minutes and 28 seconds. So now for some Q3 updates. We did finish our second high school summer internship program. We had 3 students this summer. We're going to continue doing those for the foreseeable future. We did hear back regarding our congressional directed spending application that we submitted earlier in the year. And unfortunately, that is not moving forward. We did install a 24/7 access control system for improved security at Longmont Public Media, and we also held our first gear sale event. This was something that was member created, and we basically tried to sell off any of the older equipment so that we can invest it into newer gear. We also hosted students from the Crossroads School in Longmont. That's a photo of that event. We partnered with Tinkermill, and both Tinkermill and Crossroads School hosted students for about half the day. We partnered with Boredom Fighters so that students can learn how to create music, as well as teaching them how to produce a live stream and video production. We did participate during Longmont Art Week this year. This was something new that was created by the Longmont Creative District, I believe, and that was between Longmont Art Walk and Rhythm at Roosevelt, and we had a bunch of different events going on that week. We had a booth at Longmont Art Walk as well as Rhythm at Roosevelt, and we got a lot more promotion that way and people finding out about what we're doing. And lastly, we held our quarterly Longmont Public Media Short Film Festival. So looking ahead to 2024, I'll be presenting the year-end update in Q1 of next year, but we do aim to partner with more local schools to expand our offerings and services to students. We've already partnered with Boulder County Prep School in Boulder. They're going to be bringing in students so that we can teach them about live streaming and video production. We're also working to partner with Crossroads School here in Longmont to also provide internship programs for their students. We're aiming to partner with more local businesses to provide more local content. We're going to restructure our class offerings, add more streaming platforms such as Android TV and Apple TV. And then lastly, increase corporate sponsorships and grants awarded, not just the amount that we apply to, but hopefully increase the amount that is actually awarded to us. And on that note, does anyone have any questions?
Any questions from council or comments? Sergio, I'm really, really happy to see how you've grown.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah.
Yep.
Me too.
Yeah, I bet you are. It has become an integral part, I think, of our city from where I've seen you in our first conversations to now. So good on you. It's great.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate that.
Seeing no questions, I want to thank you very much for this presentation.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
We now have a presentation from Aaron Fosdick, and this is about the CHIPS incentive program.
Good evening, Mayor Peck, members of City Council. I'm Erin Fosdick with the Longmont Economic Development Partnership. Thank you for having us and thank you for your patience. We had to reschedule this from last week and have some continued illness on our end, so we appreciate your flexibility in letting our presenter and headliner, Dan Salvetti from the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, join us. I don't plan on speaking a lot tonight. You really want to hear from Dan, who is the semiconductor industry manager. He'll go through a presentation sort of on what the CHIPS Act is bringing to Colorado, and then more specifically, what forming a CHIP zone or a series of CHIP zone in Longmont might enable us to do. So I will stick around and engage if there's questions more specific to Longmont and how we think this might help some of our primary industries that are either already located here or are considering Longmont, for businesses that are within that semiconductor supply chain. But I'd like to turn it over to Dan, who will go through a slideshow, and then we'll have some time for questions.
I'm going to start off by apologizing for moving this one week back. I was sick last week, and then at the end of this past week, my wife and daughter both tested positive for COVID. So I didn't really think it was wise to come up to you guys in person. I normally would, but here we are in the brave new world. And so thank you for accommodating me. I'm really happy to be here with you guys today. So thank you so much. So as Aaron said, I'm here to present on the CHIPS Act, what it means for Colorado, and what the CHIP Zone program can potentially do for Longmont. So we'll dive right into it. Dallas, let's go to the next slide, please. We do have three sections that we'll be going over. Basically, what's going on, and just a fun way to say what are the opportunities that we're actually seeing. Semiconductors in Colorado, what does the ecosystem actually look like today? And then what is the state strategy to help capture this growth, and what does the CHIP Zone program actually do? So Dallas, will go to the next slide, please. So what's going on? Skip forward. Okay. So this is a political cartoon from the Financial Times. It's similar to the Wall Street Journal in London, essentially. Essentially, we are at a point where the U.S. Is finding itself in a position where it needs to maintain its technological supremacy throughout the world. And in particular, we're seeing this sort of race between the U.S. and China in developing technological industries that can advance our position into the future. And so this cartoon is sort of depicting a Cold War type situation, and we really are seeing that. So some of this started in 2018 with the tariffs under the Trump administration, the Section 301 tariffs, which under the Biden administration really have remained in place against imports coming from China. We've now also under the Biden administration have put up export controls specifically for semiconductors and other enabling technologies, and have asked some of our allies like the Netherlands to do the same. You may have seen that the Dutch put up export controls on lithography machinery to China, which is absolutely crucial to the development of the most advanced chips in the world. So we really are in this position of trying to maintain U.S. global technological supremacy. So if we move forward, please, Dallas. And so that brings us to the federal industrial policy that we're seeing now. So the government, while trying to maintain this position, is putting out massive programs in order to catalyze growth in semiconductors, but other advanced industries, build capacity, and make sure that production is happening on American soil. And so the main three that have come out over the last 2 years or so are the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and then the CHIPS Act, which is what we're mainly here today talking about. But I did want to note that together, these three bills put over $2 trillion into building capacity and infrastructure for advanced technologies moving forward into the future. And so we do believe that this is going to cause a major restructuring of supply chains around the world. It's going to bring manufacturing into the U.S. and also other operations that are complementary to that manufacturing. And then it's also good to point out that these programs also contain many plans and requirements around workforce development, partnering with academia and industry, and other such innovative pathways in order to build out a broader ecosystem. So there really is a lot happening here, and we really believe it will catalyze growth in the U.S. in the future. Next slide, please. And not only that, not only the federal action by the U.S. government, but we're also seeing other governments around the world put out similar programs. So if you see, we have 8 flags over here on the right. At the top is U.S. and China, but we also have Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, Korea, India, and the EU. They all have put out similar pieces of legislation to the CHIPS Act that is trying to do the same thing that we are trying to do, build out the capacity of the advanced industries ecosystem within their borders, secure this growth for the future and move forward. And so globally, which is what this chart is on the left here, it's anticipated that we're going to see extreme growth in the semiconductor sector over the next 10 years or so. This chart that we've taken from Precedence Research is anticipating between this year and 2023, 12.3% compound annual growth rate. And the industry fully expects to be over $1 trillion globally by the end of 2023, or before 2023. Next slide, please. And so this is creating massive opportunities. And now we're going to take a step back into what the CHIPS Act actually does. So we're highlighting here basically 4 opportunities within the CHIPS Act that we are focused on and trying to pursue and make sure that the growth that these programs are going to be pushing forward will happen in Colorado. And so the first 2 there, the reason they're connected with a line is that they're for basically the similar entities. And if you take advantage of one, you probably are going to take advantage of the other. The main one there, and this is the one that's in the news a lot, is the CHIPS manufacturing incentives. And so this is a program that is for companies within the semiconductor value chain. So that includes companies that actually fabricate the chips themselves, but it also includes materials providers, equipment suppliers, and then research and development facilities as well. And that piece is yet to come out, but will be coming out very shortly. And what it does is it offers $39 billion in funding over the next 5 years to go directly to these companies as grants in order for them to expand, modernize, or construct physical locations where they could fabricate either the semiconductors or manufacture the products that are going into the fabrication facility itself. An important piece to note on that is that any of the companies that are seeking this funding, they must also have a state or a local incentive in order to be eligible for that federal funding itself. And the other thing to note is that while we have a $39 billion in direct funding, there's also a pool of about $75 billion for these companies in loan guarantees. So the estimates for what will be given out is about 15% of a capital expenditure of a project will be direct funding, and up to 35% can be the total package between all of these different vehicles. The advanced manufacturing tax credit, I won't get too much into it, but it's essentially for the same pool. It's run by the IRS. It's a tax credit rather than a grant that goes to these companies, so long as they're doing the proper investments for these projects. And then there's CHIPS, R&D, and workforce development programs. This is the development of several different federal controlled centers around the U.S. It's been described by the Secretary of Commerce as beehives of innovation, where we're going to be taking the time to go from design and R&D to actual fabrication of the products. They want to half the time, half the cost, and really make us a leader in the actual full supply chain there. And the important thing to note about this program is one of them is the CHIPS Metrology R&D program. That has already been based at the Boulder NIST labs. So we're very excited about that. And then the final program, the main program that we're pursuing, there are others that we're pursuing as well, but these are the main ones. It's a program that was authorized for $10 billion. So far has only been appropriated $500 million. But it's the regional innovation hubs. You may have heard it as the EDA tech hubs. We have we supported through the Tech Hub Now initiative, sort of stakeholder convenings and the formation of different consortia. And through that process, the state attached itself to 2 specific applications. We understood that there were another 3 or 4 that went forward as well, but we attached ourselves to 2. One of them made it through the phase 1 designation as a tech hub for quantum technologies. So we do have that. And now that they have the phase 1 designation, phase 2, which will end in February, after that application process, we could see grants coming into that consortium of up to $70 million. So we're pursuing that as well. Next slide, please. I think we may need to go the other way. There we go. And just to give you a sense of what the impact means for Colorado. So this is just from that first opportunity that we highlighted, the CHIPS manufacturing incentives. Again, that first line is showing the direct funding in millions. This is $39 billion in direct funding nationally. Colorado, you could say we're somewhere between 2 and 3%, and depending on the segment, maybe even a little more than 3% of the national semiconductor ecosystem. And so if we're looking at that benchmark, that's somewhere between 780 million and 1.2 billion in direct funding coming to the state from the government, federal government. The next line is sort of what we estimate the private capital expenditure will be on the projects that $39 billion is looking to incentivize. This is a rough estimate. It's essentially, as I mentioned, the direct funding can be up to 15% of a project's capital expenditure. So if we take that 15% applied to that $39 billion, we're looking at a total of $260 billion. You could take that as a sort of a lower estimate, because if there are certain projects are only giving 10% of the capital expenditure in direct funding, then that total rises. But with that low estimate, again, at that 2 to 3%, we're looking at somewhere between 5.2 and 7.8 billion in the state. direct permanent employment, there's been several studies. One of them is pointing out that after the entire program, we'll have about 42,000 direct new employees in the semiconductor industry. And then the next line there is 280,000. That's the total employment impact in permanent jobs, which includes direct, indirect, and induced employment. And so in that first line, 2 to 3% is about 840 to, getting close to 1,300 employees, and then 5,600 to 8,400. And just to give you a sense, we already have several companies pursuing this funding in the state, and their combined capital expenditure, private capital expenditure, so again, looking at that second line, is nearing 3.5 billion. So we're already nearing that low estimate from what we know certain companies are doing in the state, and their combined employment is actually surpassing that 3%. Right now, their plans are closer to the 1,500 mark. So we are already seeing the investments that we thought would be coming from the CHIPS Act, and we're here to spur those on even more and make sure we get the growth. Next slide, please. So what does the semiconductor industry look like in Colorado? So we can go straight to the next slide. It's important to note that we are among a handful of places in the U.S. that's leading in this industry. It's not really well known, but we are 9th in total facilities in the U.S. Of those, we're 5th in design and R&D density. So that means the share of our activities that are in R&D and design are the 5th out of all of the states that actually have facilities dedicated to semiconductor manufacturing. We have 2 major fabrication facilities. We have the only flat panel semiconductor foundry outside of Asia. Just a unique piece of our industry here. We do have a robust ecosystem of electronic design automation. So these are the companies that create the software that then the chip designers and fabricators use to actually build the chips. You could think of it as sort of like AutoCAD for the semiconductor industry. And then supply chain companies. So as we mentioned, materials providers and equipment providers are also here in the state. And then as I mentioned before, that CHIPS metrology and R&D program is already here. And this is just a map of semiconductor industry establishments by NAICS code 334413. We know that this data is not perfect, but we think it does show that we are one of these main spots in the U.S. And we've sort of circled some of the other ones as well. Next slide, please. This is pointing out some of the main names and just sort of showing the genesis across the value chain there. So as I said before, we do have the full value chain here from R&D and design, materials and equipment providers, actual fabrication, and then packaging and testing. Some of these names are among the largest and most well-known semiconductor companies in the U.S. I think 7 of the 15 top valued semiconductor companies are actually in Colorado, and their logos are here now. Some of them that you may know are Broadcom, Analog Devices, AMD, NVIDIA. If you've been watching any type of stock market analysis, has been sort of a darling of those of recent months. But I actually haven't been paying attention in the last month, so hopefully I'm not biting my own words there. And the stock market go up and down pretty quickly. And then Infineon, pretty large name. Some of our materials and equipment providers include Integris, Corestech, Forge Nano, and then we also have Solidigm, Cadence, and some of the other ones working more in the software side of things. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So getting down to what's actually in Longmont, by the numbers, and this is pulling from Lightcast, which is formerly EMSI, if anyone's familiar with that data platform. They've gone through a couple name changes here recently. But then also the Semiconductor Industry Association, we pulled in some data from there. From that, we're seeing about 12 payroll locations, 4 from Semiconductor Industry Association. So those 4 are sort of more of a given. We know that data has been more rigorously checked. This is equating to about $193 million in total sales. 569 total jobs, and a location quotient of about 4.22, which is very strong for this industry. So essentially, for the size of Longmont, this industry is a large concentration within your borders. And then some of the names that were on the other side but are also in Longmont are AMD, which has a pretty substantial facility out on the Diagonal Highway, Micron, Western Digital, Solidigm, and Seagate as well. Next slide, please. So getting into our strategy and what the chip zones actually are. Go to the next slide. To be quite blunt, Colorado, we're going to capture this opportunity. We are starting with a growth from within strategy. And of course, because all strategies have to do this, we gave it a acronym that is reflective of what it's talking about. So CHIP. CHIP is convene stakeholders to create opportunities and connections, heighten awareness of Colorado and the global semiconductor narrative, invest in communities to bolster competitiveness for semiconductors and advanced industries, and provide support to local entities seeking CHIPS funding. And so within that sort of 4-pillar strategy, we've taken several actions already. We're expanding our incentives with the refundable credits and CHIP zones. We're launching other programs that are hopefully coming out very soon, the Colorado CHIPS Community Support Programs. We're looking to reduce non-financial barriers, so we're working with CDPHE to expand their air permitting capacity through an interagency agreement. We're also participating globally, so Semicon Europa was mid-November that we went to, and we will be going to Semicon Korea, but then also engaging with folks in Taiwan. And then encouraging consortia. So we've supported the Tech Hub application that got us the Elevate Quantum Consortia for the funding through the Regional Innovation Program. We're also working with a finalist in the NSF Engine Program. And then we're trying to figure out ways to make sure that we capture the National Semiconductor Technology Center and the National Advanced Packaging and Manufacturing Program, or at least part of those national programs that are coming out through the CHIPS Act. And so next slide, please. And so getting into actually the CHIP zones. So the CHIP zones came to us, it was one of 2 programs that came out of HB 23-1260. The other one being the Colorado CHIPS refundable tax credits, which do have a little bit of an overlap, but they are separate programs. Basically, the process is that a municipality and/or, excuse me, a county work to identify an area on which they want to establish a CHIP zone, and then they pass a resolution stating as such. We want to put a CHIP zone. We want to put it in this area. All that detail. They then apply to my office, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. I do have a application template that Aaron and I will be working on later, so long as we get to that point. Aletta will present this to the Economic Development Commission in order to designate the area. Then the EDC will have the opportunity to approve, deny, or modify the area brought forward. And then once that is established, a semiconductor company that is operating in that area can access credits from the enterprise zone program that already exists. So in order to do that, the semiconductor company has to pre-certify for the eligible credits each year. And then when they file their taxes, they certify that they've made those investments. And then they are able to get their credit from the Department of Revenue. And so I'll skip down to the benefits first, because I already kind of started on that. The semiconductor company that's in the CHIP zone, they have access to 5 of the about 9 or 10 enterprise zone credits that currently exist. So this is a state program of income tax incentives, but there's also one that is a sales and use abatement tax, but we won't tax abatement, but we won't get into that one. The 5 that semiconductor company can specifically access are the business facility new employee, the business personal property, commercial vehicle investment, job training, and research development tax credits. And so these are 1,100 per job, 3% of a qualifying investment, 1.5% of a purchase price of commercial vehicles, 12% of the training costs, and then 3% of expenses for R&D. And so these are real. This is a real value for a company operating in an area that is not covered by an enterprise zone, but now can have access to this program. For the application to the state, in order to make a chip zone a reality, the locality has to include a resolution for each impacted locality. So, for instance, if a chip zone were to be in Boulder County, unincorporated area, but also Longmont, and then also City of Boulder, the City of Longmont, and Boulder County would all have to have a resolution attached to it. But if it's all within the City of Longmont borders, then we would just need a resolution from the City Council here today. We would need a proposed zone boundaries, which would include a description and a map, potential business development and job growth estimates, so description of how the chip zone would actually help in this regard, and then estimates on the number of jobs, number of CapEx, things like that would come out of establishing the chip zone. We'd want it to be consistent with the area's economy. So again, this is just a description of, this is the vision of the leadership of the area, and having a chip zone and helping grow this industry is within that vision. And then, of course, a point of contact for us to maintain communication and assist us in reporting on the program in the future. And then next slide, please. And so boiling this down to sort of hopefully 5 simple points, why establish a chip zone at all? It really is a pretty low risk, high reward action. There's a massive federal drawdown potential. So the access to state incentives for local companies, this helps them meet the eligibility requirements for the federal incentives. And so having, being able to access the enterprise zone credits can count for their covered incentive requirement to help them bring in that federal funding to the state. Business attraction, if a chip zone is set up and a company is considering operations and they're in a semiconductor ecosystem, that location becomes that much more attractive for them to potentially move into. Jobs and capital expenditure. Like I mentioned before, the existing planned expansions that we know of with our companies that are already in the state are totaling over 1,500 jobs and $3 billion in capital expenditures right now. Community investment, we didn't really get into it, but the CHIPS Act and the applications for the direct funding must include workforce development plans, childcare plans, and other wraparound services, and also must have some type of community investment or commitments piece as well. So these companies, they have to be doing something to develop workforce, provide childcare, or in another way, commit to the community that they're growing in. And then the last point is that they're performance-based. So we set up this chip zone. A company is operating in there, but they don't make any of the investments that they have been sort of estimating or planning to do, then they don't get any of the funding on the back end. So it really is based on the company hiring workers and making investments in order for them to get the credits at all, to see any benefit. And with that, we'll move to the last slide, Dallas. I'll say thank you very much for your time. This is my contact information. If we could share this around afterward, and anyone feel free to get in touch with me, and happy to answer any other questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Very interesting. Do counselors have any questions or comments? Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I think this is really exciting, and I think this is an opportunity. It's nice that Colorado is one of the states that's already leading in this industry, and I think that if we can get that overlay of where we want to put our chip zones, that would be great to start to establish. And, I think that's something that we really need to pursue vigorously.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else, can we go back to slide 7? I do have one question. Thank you. So in your second circle here, the 24 billion, you say 25 tax credit. This has to come from, no, I'm sorry, the first circle must have state and local incentive. Going to the second circle, does that incentive include, or can the state tax credit be the incentive? Or is this something different?
So for the first circle there, the chips manufacturing incentives, the actual term that they use in the statute is a covered incentive. And the way they define that is any local or state incentive. And then they identify like several different types, which includes like tax abatements, state income tax credits, but then also end their sort of detailed list with or anything that the CHIPS program office, who's running this whole program, deems appropriate. And so really it's a pretty wide swath of what would be applicable. This CHIP zone program, we are fully intending it and believe that it qualifies as a covered incentive, which is why we want to make sure it gets out. And these companies that are already operating in a community now have a state incentive in order to meet that covered incentive requirement.
Okay, great. It's not something separate. It all works together, basically.
All works together, right? So if they have the incentive from the state, then they don't need a local incentive.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Peck.
Councillor Christ.
Dan, do you have any idea what institutions of learning are training and studying semiconductor manufacturing?
Yeah, we CU Boulder has a rather rigorous program. They are one of the facilities identified actually in the Semiconductor Industry Association's data of being a R&D facility for semiconductors. But Mines, Colorado State University, they all have programs. And then a really important piece for the CHIPS Act is that it's not just one type of employee that they're looking for, like a chip designer, or chip engineer, or something like that. There's also a lot of technicians that are working in this field. So programs in electrical and computer engineering, even at the technician level, are really important. So we're already seeing that. We know that some of our companies are already partnering with Front Range Community College, Pikes Peak State College down in the Springs, and others doing similar programs as well. So as long as there's a computer and electrical engineering department, that's a good sign for us to work with and to push forward. And I should say the workforce development piece is one that the state is still looking to better support. And right now we're sort of in the midst of bringing everyone we can together from the education and academia world to better understand how everyone can work together. But that's sort of where we are now. And but all those large schools have programs, have sort of lab facilities that are doing a lot of R&D. So a good one to mention too is the microelectronics research lab down at the University of Colorado Springs campus. They have their own research lab down there as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is an interesting field, but there's been a reason why Taiwan has been the leader in this area, and that's because this type of manufacturing is not very easy. So I just wondered,
No, it isn't.
a lot of what you mentioned is in research and development in this area. So we don't have a lot of people that are actually in full-scale manufacturing yet. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue it. I just think it's not an immediate, something where we can open the doors and hire people. I think it's going to take a little on-ramping to get up to speed on this.
Completely agree. And I will say that is why we're focused on the full value chain, as is the CHIPS Act itself. So a lot of the companies we've been working with, we have a couple that are actually, we have 3 that we're working with right now that are in Colorado, have manufacturing operations, and are all trying, and I should say manufacturing is fabrication of semiconductors, and they're all trying to expand. We also have like another cadre, probably a larger and more well-known group of companies that have R&D and design centers in the state. And that's a piece that we're still trying to figure out how to activate, because we know that's a really good benefit. But as you say, the actual production is a really tricky thing to balance. And so we're trying to work with that. And then we also have this few supply chain companies that are all expanding here. And so totally agree. It is an upward battle. And even the CHIPS Act is identifying a large gap in the workforce of the future that we're trying to figure out how to fill. But we're trying to get there for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Seeing no other questions, thank you so much for this presentation. It's a lot to digest, but it's a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Peck, council members.
Hope your family gets better.
Yeah.
Me too.
So we're going to move on to the first call, public invited to be heard. Once again, the first person on the list is James Kenworthy. Jim, I want to just remind you that we have 3 minutes and we need your name and address. You have to press the button to turn on the microphone. Then the sound level would be great. It's not on yet. Thank you.
Thank you. James Kenworthy, 107 Caribou Place. I'm here to ask the city council to label the city of Longmont a ceasefire city. As I understand it, the United Nations tried to declare a ceasefire. The U.S. vetoed the resolution, and a few other countries also vetoed. You can imagine which ones. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Netanyahu and his cohorts are also a terrorist organization. They're both descendants of Abraham. That makes it a family feud, and that makes it a family tragedy. Netanyahu said the 3 hostages who were accidentally killed was a terrible tragedy, and he never said anything about the 19,000 Palestinians that have been killed so far. There are Israelis that don't agree with Netanyahu's actions. And there are a lot of innocent Palestinians. Joe Biden went to Israel to give that terrorist, Netanyahu, a bear hug. Yaquim Jeffries also shook hands with Netanyahu. Our representative, Joe Neguse, is quiet on the matter. I don't know what happens to people when they get elected, but it seems they go deaf. Or maybe it has something to do with money. 10 large cities have called for a ceasefire. 3 or 4 of them in California, Chicago, Seattle, and Detroit. There was a survey in the New York Times this morning. The question, do you approve of President Biden's handling of the Israeli-Palestinian situation? Approve, 35%. Don't know or refuse to ask the question, 11%. Disapprove, 57%. So 57% of the people that were surveyed disapprove of Joe Biden's actions with Israel. I think it's time for us to speak up. As always, it's up to us, the ordinary people, to make our voices heard. We live in a democracy. We can speak. I have the hunch that the majority of the thinking citizens in the city. Does that mean I'm done?
It does.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
The next one on the list is Lance Whitaker.
Mayor and Council, my name is Lance Whitaker. I live at 1750 Collier Street. I've been a Longmont resident for about 45 years. I'd like to remind people today that today is National Oatmeal Muffin Day. Yeah. And it's also National Hard Candy Day and National Magic Day. So if you have any magic tricks, please show me them. I like them. I would like to put a shout out just before Christmas to all those people out there who are separated from their family and may not have kids. God loves you, and Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Strider Benston.
Sorry, I thought Stan was ahead of me. Anyway, Strider Benston, is it on?
Yes, it's on, Strider.
951 West 17th. Several things. Today, the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that the former president did engage in insurrection and consequently, under the 14th Amendment, is not allowed to run for public office again. Of course, that's going to be further adjudicated, and we basically know how the corruption at the highest levels are, that basically every people currently on any side is voting in terms of who they think is going to win the Civil War that the former president is trying to incite. And he's already been quoting Adolf Hitler regularly, almost every day. I mentioned this 7 or 8 years ago here, but it's really dangerous to speak truth before the people know what it is. I do have a Master of Humanities and Philosophy and History and Political Science. Therefore, I have never been allowed to have a job other than heavy labor. And it's all connected. And Judge Michael Luttig, who was appointed by Herbert Walker Bush, president, recently retired from the U.S. Court of Appeals, said there is no Republican Party. It's merely a Trump cult. Is this still on? I can't ever get an answer. Anyway, 24 days ago, I was hit head-on by a truck intentionally, And I didn't know, because I was knocked out for 4 or 5 seconds, I didn't realize that I had been run over. There was absolutely certain attempt to kill me by hitting me. I knew it was intentional, but I thought maybe he just hates old people on bicycles, whoever was driving the truck. And there were 5 eyewitnesses, so it may turn up. Destroyed my e-bike. I've got some difficulties related to it. And that's just real life. Most people don't study history, and education is being abolished in this country, so people only vote on single issues. You got immigration, you got abortion, but we need to be voting for democracy and the survival of the United States of America and the Republic. Thank you.
Thank you, Strider. Stan Toll.
Council, I guess this is our, what is the second session of the new council? Is that, am I correct?
I think you are.
Okay. Well, what I've been coming up here and advocating, one of the things that happens, I go by intersection where a young girl was hit and killed by a car. Now, what I'm talking to the city council about is to try to change how the city council thinks about and interacts with doing their traffic in the town and how to keep pedestrians and cars safe. The main thing about that young girl, what came up is, well, the driver did, partook some sort of substance, and the substance in the driver was blamed for the accident. And no change has ever been made with that intersection. And that is what I'm trying to say. When we have these accidents and when we do things in town, we kind of think about it. We don't even think about it like how we're doing our stop signs and how we're doing our intersections with stoplights. And what I'm asking the council to get them, I use the term woke, which means to be educated and aware, and to pay attention to this issue, because instead of just blaming the driver, or I had a car got hit, and it seemed like the thing that the city was most interested in was impounding my vehicle and having it towed, because they make $125 for that. And so what I'm advocating is that whenever we have these accidents, is that the city council really ensure that not a police report on who was at fault, but what can be done if somebody makes a mistake that people aren't getting hurt. Things like roundabouts, things like instead of having the stop sign on the other side of the sidewalk, have it like they're doing some of the newer stop signs, like on Terry and 19th, where the stop sign is out where people can see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Seeing no one on the list, I'm going to close first call public invited to be heard. We're now at the consent agenda and introduction and reading by title of first reading ordinances. Don, would you mind reading the ordinances into the record?
I'd be happy to, Mayor. If we could please take a 5-minute or so tech break. We need to reboot some equipment.
Of
that
course.
is not functioning properly.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you. 2023-103, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the boundaries of a proposed area of the city to be submitted to the Director of the Colorado Office of Economic Development for designation as a CHIPS zone under the Colorado CHIPS Zone Act. Item 9B is Resolution 2023-108, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing the agreement between the City of Longmont and DocuPet, Inc. for the provision of pet licensing software. 9C is Resolution 2023-109, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and Regional Transportation District for EcoPass contract.
That was short. Do councilors want to pull any items on the consent agenda? Seeing no one, can I have a vote? A motion, Thank you. Moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor McCoy to move this consent agenda. Let's vote. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We're now at general business. A on our general business agenda is an appeal of denial of certificate of appropriateness and certificate of hardship by Historic Preservation Commission regarding proposed window replacement at 545 Collier Street. And thank you.
Good evening, members of the council. Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson, Principal Planner with Planning and Development Services. I'm here tonight to discuss an appeal of a Historic Preservation Commission denial for a certificate of appropriateness and certificate of hardship at 545 Collier Street. I was notified this afternoon by the appellant that she is traveling back to Colorado today and had a flight delay that has prevented her from being here tonight. And she has requested that we postpone this hearing. So at this point, I'll defer to City Attorney May to discuss the appropriate way for the council to handle this.
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, City Attorney. Given that it's on the agenda, I think the recommended approach would be to open the hearing and make a motion to continue. I think we looked at February 13th. So continue it to a date certain. And see if there's anybody in the audience that was here for that hearing. I don't think so, but.
We'll open it anyway.
Sure.
Thank you, Eugene. So I'd like to open the public hearing on the appeal of denial of certificate of appropriateness. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this appeal? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing on this appeal and ask for a motion. Or it looks like Councilor McCoy?
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'd like to move that we, what was that, Eugene?
February 13th.
Move this to February 13th.
Second. Right, it's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Martin. Is there any discussion by council? Seeing none, let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you. The next thing on our general business is a presentation and approval of the 2024 Human Services funding allocations. Yeah. Ah. There you go. Oh.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of Longmont City Council. I'm Christina Pacheco. Human Services Director. I'm going to go ahead and get us started tonight as we talk about our Human Services Agency funding recommendations. I want to give some background, talk about our framework, and then Eliberto Mendoza, our Human Services Project Coordinator, who also provides support and facilitates the process, will talk about the allocation process itself and the recommendations that come from our Longmont Human Services Advisory Board. I then want to talk about what our funding has looked like from 2020 to 2024 and call out some specific measures that we'll be taking to address the challenges we foresee in the next years. So let's start with some background. So in 2024, we'll have 3% of the general fund to allocate for human services funding. That's about $2.6 million. 56% of that, about $1.4 million, will go to support safety net services through this competitive application process that we just completed. And so we're here to talk about that tonight primarily. The other 44, about $1.2 million, will be used to address housing insecurity and adult homelessness. So in terms of our funding framework, it's meant to assist low to moderate income community members with their basic needs. These dollars really fund a range of services that assist individuals and families in stabilizing and thriving. This funding is linked to what we learned from our 2020 Community Human Services Needs Assessment, and it prioritizes the following pillars and really aligns with the social determinants of health: housing stability, food and nutrition, health and well-being, self-sufficiency and resilience, education and skill building, and safety and justice. The Longmont Housing and Human Services Advisory Board coordinates this overall process and then brings forward the funding recommendations to City Council for approval. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eliberto, and he's going to talk about the allocation process and funding recommendations.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and Council. Eliberto Mendoza, City of Longmont Human Services Project Coordinator. So our allocation process for the last 5 years, we have worked to make it as fair and equitable as possible. We've made it formulaic to try and remove as much as possible the subjectivity of our process. We have scores. Our board reviews and evaluates each application, reviewing program outcomes and program how the program delivers its services throughout the community and who it delivers it to. And so they have a range of questions that they review and score a basis of 1 to 5. Staff looks at a lot of the financial piece of the agency, including how much of the ask, how much the agency is asking Longmont to fund its program. Longmont City funding isn't meant to fully fund a single program in this process. We are a part of the help, but we are not the only funder, and nor should we be the main funder for any of these programs. And so that is taken into account as well. Then we have, like I said, a formulaic allocation process where we take the scores and create ranges based on those scores. So some of the principles that we work with, one is the board made a decision a few years ago to reset the funding to zero. In the past, the board used historical funding to set funding amounts. And the board, about 5 years ago, decided to go to, we're going to reset every year. We have priority ceilings for each area. And we say that any agency cannot receive more than 50% of whatever that priority ceiling is. So we keep to some of those principles. We also want to make sure that we take into account the ranges and fund appropriately based on how well the agency scored, because it is a competitive process after all. So in 2024, we received applications from 48 agencies to fund 58 programs. The total request amounted to 2.4, and this is after staff reviewed some other agencies and screened out agencies based on them not being totally aligned, or the agency asking for funding that traditionally we don't fund with the human services program. Typically our human services funding is meant for program support. And so even after we screened, we still had 2.4 million in request, and we only had 1.4 in available. So it was a very hard year for staff and the board as we struggled with all of these agencies that made it through are wonderful agencies doing really good work. And, it was a challenge to do the evaluations and then to do the scores, understanding that, some agencies who are doing great work would lose some funding from what they had. Even though we do always go back to zero and we tell folks it's competitive, of course, it's hard on the board and staff to do this really difficult work. But the board, I always commend the board for doing it. They do their job. They had over 14 hours of hearings, plus whatever hours they put into reviewing the application. So I always commend. It's not an easy board to be on, but they do good work. So, let me just finish up. So we are recommending for 1.4 million to 45 agencies and 55 programs. That is an increase from last year. We seem to be increasing every year. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as an increasing challenge is before us. And we have some data on that to share. But we did increase as well this year the number of agencies and particularly programs that we funded. So as you can see, here are their priority areas, and here's how much of the funding went to. We always would like housing stability to be the highest, but we don't control, as staff or board, we don't control who applies to this fund. And if more agencies that are providing education and skill building programs apply and they are aligned and meet the criteria and score well, they will be funded. So you can see that even though our housing stability is our biggest priority, it did not get funded as much. Again, we don't tell agencies how much to apply for as well, so that also comes into play. We just review and we allocate based on a formulaic process. So it has been, typically we don't always follow our own priority guidelines just because we can't control who's going to come to the table with what program they're going to ask for. So I think I'm going to turn it back to Christina to talk about our challenges.
So as you'll notice in this chart, the only time that we had such a high difference between the percentage of amount requested and the amount available was in 2020. The increase in the amounts requested from 2023 to 2024 was 34%, but the amount available to allocate only increased by 2%. So between 2020 and 2021, the amount requested reduced by 3%. Between 2021 and 2022, it increased by 9%. And between 2022 and 2023, it increased by 26%. So really, the bottom line is what this tells us is that human services set aside is not keeping up with the growing number of requests from our local nonprofits. And we anticipated some of this dynamic, knowing what the economy has looked like, knowing the struggles that our nonprofits have. And so given that, beginning in September of this year, we began a series of nonprofit engagement sessions. And Council has that corresponding white paper report out from those sessions. And staff is going to continue to work with our advisory board and nonprofit partners to leverage the funds that we do have to make the biggest impact in the community. And so we'll be providing updates from the work on that report and the outcome and our work with nonprofits. So next, I want to talk about some work that has come out of the year-end process that we go through with the advisory board. We know that, as Eliberto said, there was $1 million more in requested funds than we had to allocate, and that was after we screened out some programs and some organizations. At the end of the application and hearing process, once the initial recommendations are ready to be brought to council, staff always takes the opportunity to do a debrief with the advisory board to check in about the process. What worked really well? What are some things that they would change if they had the opportunity? And what we heard is a desire to change some of the questions on the application themselves, on the application itself. For the board to then be clearer on the work that the agencies are doing. And as a side note, we also heard some feedback from organizations that they also would like some of the questions maybe streamlined maybe an easier application process. So staff is going to bring this back to our funders collaborative with our other municipal and county government partners and really voice that need and work through that. The board was also clear that the human services funding process needs to change. And so staff is charged with bringing back different options on how to make process changes and present that to the board in early 2024 to really address how we could, as I mentioned, leverage the resources we have and meet the need with the information that we have at this point. So at this point, what we have are, any questions you have about our recommendations, and we're here to ask council to adopt the recommendations or provide further direction.
We have any council comments about the allocations? Councilor Christ.
I'm happy to see greater funding in education and skill development. I think that's a great place. It leads to a lot of economic development and a lot of advancement in income. So I think that's a great place. And it looks like you're doing a fabulous job in terms of being very equitable and really addressing what people are providing to you in terms of need. So thank you.
Thank you.
As I look at your diagram and the different pies that are on there, I think it would be incredibly difficult to figure this out because so many nonprofits merge into all the areas.
Right.
And how do you separate that and prioritize?
Right.
So
Right.
I think you do a great job. And I would like a motion or Councilor McCoy.
Thank you. I just want to compliment you as well. I think it was in the 90s when I was serving on that board, and I know the process and I appreciate it. And so I'd like to move approval of the 2024 funding recommendations as presented by the Longmont Housing and Human Services Advisory Board.
So the recommendations have been adopted by a motion, are going to be adopted by a motion by Councilor McCoy and seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Any more discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. As soon as I change my screen. Oh, I'm sorry. So can we do a question? My screen just won't. Let's do everyone who, all those who approve, say aye. All those, shoot. Yes. My screen is giving me fits. All those opposed? Seeing none? Thank you. That passes unanimously. Now I can see the screen. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It was great. All right. Now we're at the board and commission appointments, and our city clerk will take our recommendations.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. So this past Saturday, you all interviewed some applicants for the city advisory boards. You interviewed applicants that were recommended by the boards as part of the applicant vetting process that we follow. So I have sent you all an electronic ballot, which is also on the screen, just a few instructions. For starters, we will vote only those contests or those boards that are with a bold title, like this one for Airport Advisory Board. I have some backup ballots with not a bold title in case we hit a tie or something of the sort along the line. So I have those prepped, but you don't need to vote those yet. So please vote only the bold questions. The boards provided you a recommendation for applicants that they felt were qualified for the boards. Those applicants are in bold italic in the list of applicants, as you can see on the screen. A couple of the boards provided a ranking of their recommended order of preference that they would appoint those applicants because there were more applicants than seats available. In those two cases, that's Airport Advisory Board and Planning and Zoning, I put the names in your ballot also in the ranked order, just to help you have a visual there that looks very similar to the items you've been seeing in your application packet. So if you would please take a few moments and vote your preferences. Yes. Did you want a mic on, Councilmember McCoy? Thank you. It's hard to hear in TV land.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Don, on this, like the second one, if you voted for somebody in the first ranking there, then you had the italicized bold. If you wanted to vote for one of those people again, just in case it didn't come out, you can do that.
You could do that, yes. We will see how that turns out. So I will pause for a moment. The form is functioning for everybody? You're able to vote? Just want to confirm. So I am seeing 4 of you have voted so far, and I will wait until I see 7 up there, and then we'll. Do you need a sticker? I voted. I should have thought of that. Just to be sure, you have to hit submit at the bottom for it to enter your votes. Ta-da, we have the magic number 7. All right, thank you so much. Let's see how this went. So, on Airport Advisory Board, 2 regular member terms ending December 31st, 2026. I will show who voted how in just a moment, but I just want to show you the tallies first. So Richard Malcolm Dean has received 5 votes, and then Melinda Jordan has received 7. There's a visual of how those votes went down, and so those will be your 2 regular member appointees. Moving on to the unexpired regular member term ending December 31st, 2025. This is for that resignation we just got that we told you about on Saturday. Here we have 4 votes for Dan Meester, 2 for Matthew Menza, and 1 for Patrick Dillon. So vote of 4 will work, and Dan Meester will be your unexpired through 2025. And there's the result of how those votes went. Moving down to the last Airport Advisory Board one, looks like we're going to get a revote this one. This is the unexpired term ending next December, December 2024. We have quite a split going. So 1 person voted for Malcolm Dean, 1 for Melinda, 1 for Meester, or 2 for Meester, 2 for Matthew, 1 for Patrick Dillon. So Malcolm Dean and Melinda Jordan and Dan Meester were already appointed. So if you would please go to number 6, it's already there, and vote ballot number 6. Oh, Sandy deleted those that you shouldn't vote for. Thank you. Do you not have the ballot still pulled up? So click the link again. Yes, please. Thank you. Those are the technicalities. I'm not, yeah. No. Number 6. We're on number 6. And hit submit, yes. It's barring you from answering?
Well, no, it's saying that we're required to vote on the ones that we've already voted.
Because they're all required. Okay, I can't fix that on the fly. Would you like to do this by motion? I mean, I could, it'd take a few minutes. That will mess with how we capture, because we will document these. Yeah, so please don't revote ones you voted. Yeah, if your 2 candidates are Matthew Menza and Patrick Dillon. Those are in order of the ranked order from the board in terms of their recommendation. Would anybody like to make a motion to appoint one of those persons to the December 31st, 2024? Yes, hand vote, please.
I know. Yes.
In favor of Matthew Menza to the 2024 unexpired term. And Mayor, I'm sorry, I didn't capture your vote.
I know.
I know, okay. Thank you. That is a technical detail we'll figure out for the next round, yes, okay. On to number 7. Art and Public Places, you have 2 unexpired vacancies ending June 30th, 2026. You have selected 2 candidates, the 2 recommended, Sage Alexander and Eve Lacey, by a vote of 6 and 7 respectively. So let me display that for you. And you can see how those votes went. So both of those people will be appointed. It works when it works. We will skip the extra ballots. On to Callahan, you have 2 regular member terms, but just 1 applicant, Karen Cruz. All 7 of you voted for Karen Cruz, so unanimous. I don't necessarily need to display that one. Golf Course Advisory Board, same again, 2 regular member terms ending 2026, 1 applicant recommended by the board, Ann Dorozensky, and by unanimous vote, she is appointed. Moving on to Historic Preservation, 2 regular member terms ending 2027. Again, 1 applicant recommended by the board, and you all voted for Herb Fenster unanimously. So this works well in those instances. We'll see how we do on Housing and Human Services. Not bad, very good. We have 3 regular terms ending December 31st, 2026. Jeffrey Boring received 5 votes, Catherine Lau received 7, and Kimberly String will be reappointed with 6 votes. So those will be your 3 regular member appointees, and let me display that vote for the record. Keeping Eugene and the public happy. So we don't need to vote the extra ballots. We have a 1 unexpired regular member term. And this one we will need to revote, and we'll have to do that by motion and hand vote based on our previous experience with that not working well. So your candidates would be Manzo or Sandoval, Robert Manzo or Michael Sandoval, because the others were appointed. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Been moved by Councilor Yarbrough, seconded by Councilor Martin, that we vote for Michael Sandoval for Housing and Human Services. All those in favor, just say aye. Opposed? Passes.
Okay. Moving on to Master Board of Appeals, 3 regular member terms ending December 31st, 2026. You all voted by a vote of 6 for Adam Goldstone, Andy Ulmer, and Chris Vaswig. All are current members. One of them is an alternate, will become a regular member. And there's that vote display. Moving on to Parks and Recreation, you have 3 members' terms ending 2026, and only 2 applicants who were both recommended. Scott Conlon and Nick Novello were both appointed by a unanimous vote of the council. Planning and Zoning has 1 regular member term ending December 2028. These are 5-year terms. The board recommended an alternate be promoted, if you will, to a regular term member. And so it looks like we don't have a clear answer on this one. We have 2 for Selena, 3 for Jerry, 1 vote for Amy, and 1 for Don Russell. Let me display that.
I just wanted to point out that we were informed during the interview process that Selena Kohler was no longer wanting to be a regular member, or is no longer interested in being a regular term. She wanted to stay as an alternate. So I just want to point that out.
Okay. So would you like to make a motion?
Do you want to make a motion?
Would you like me to display that again?
Yes, please. I did. And Shakita did. So do we need to make a motion, or can Councilor Yarbrough and myself change our vote?
If you would do a motion just for clarity, that'd be
Okay.
best for me. Thank you.
Okay.
I move Jerry Boone be appointed as the regular member until 2028.
Okay, so Councilor Who the heck are you? Rodriguez moved that Jerry Boone be appointed as the regular member for P and Z, seconded by Counselor,
Yarborough.
no.
Hidalgo
Hidalgo
Ferring,
Ferring.
okay.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So that passes.
5-2, 5-2.
Did you vote for that too as well, Marcia? Okay, I didn't look down there. Okay,
I
5-2.
captured, yeah, Kristen McCoy dissenting.
Okay.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to your planning and zoning, because your alternate, Jerry, has been appointed as a regular, now we have an alternate vacancy. So we eliminated all the alternates because they already serve, they already have a term, and Jerry now has a regular term. So here are your two, and it looks like we are missing a vote. There's only 6 votes cast on this one. So let me see who's. Yeah, Councilmember Martin. Aw. So we have a tie 3-3 with Councilmember Martin, her vote missing. Tom Lang or Don Russell. And Don Russell also applied for Master Board. Did we appoint him?
No.
No, okay.
Second. So Counselor Martin moved that we vote for Tom Lang as the alternate member for Planning and Zoning, and I seconded that. All those in favor? Say aye. All those opposed? So that passes 5-2. 4?
Who was the third? I apologize. Hidalgo Ferring, Rodriguez?
Oh, okay.
You were a nay? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
3
very
nays.
good. Moving on to Senior Citizens Advisory Board, you have 3 regular member terms ending 2026. A lot of great candidates due to legwork done by the board. So let's see where we got. The recommended applicants, again in bold italic, Eric Brack received 6 votes, David Brenna, 3 votes. This is a tiny screen, I apologize. Sheila Conroy, 3 votes, Maria Cortez, 6, and John Higgins, 3. So from this vote, Eric Brack and Maria Cortez will go forward, or will be appointed. And then we don't have a clear result for the third person. Let me just show you those results. I apologize, they don't fit on one. Is my computer playing?
Yes.
I didn't even know that computer had volume.
Hang on.
Okay, Councilmember McCoy, you voted, you motioned
I move
Higgins?
John Higgins.
Second.
Moved John Higgins for the Senior Citizens Advisory Board, seconded by Counselor Christ. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? So that passes 6-1 with Counselor Martin in opposition. Yep, makes sense.
Did you find the culprit, Sandy? Super strange. Number 29, Senior Citizen Advisory Board, unexpired, 2 unexpired regular member terms ending 2025. So it looks like Ann Coakley, who received 4 votes, and then we'll need a second one by motion. Let me show you how this, Eric got 2, David Brenna 1, Ann Coakley got 4 votes, Sheila Conroy 2, Maria Cortez 2, John Higgins 1. So a couple of those people already appointed. This will give you an idea.
So do we have to do 2 more, or are we just doing 1?
Just 1. Ann
Okay.
Coakley received 4, so that is a majority, and that works.
So I'm going to
Eric and
move
Maria.
that we appoint Maria Cortez.
She's already
she
appointed.
was?
And Higgins.
Can you go back to close this window?
Yes.
There, okay.
I wonder if it's my laptop, Sandy? No?
Maybe it's your phone.
Ann got the 4 votes.
Yeah, so she was on, so it would be between David and, yeah. That's what, I would nominate Sheila Conroy.
I'll second that. Councillor Hidalgo Faring nominated Sheila Conroy for the Senior Citizens Advisory Board, and I seconded that. Let's vote. All those in favor? All those opposed, so that passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
I
And
like
that is
this.
all of your appointments.
I like this process, but I do
A couple
miss
tweaks.
the runners.
Yes.
You just send Harold up and down.
Thank you very much. So we will notify those who were appointed tonight and boards tomorrow, starting tomorrow, and get to work getting people going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, this was great. So now we're on to final call, public invited to be heard. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address council? Seeing none, I will close final call, public invited to be heard. Do we have any mayor and council comments? Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Earlier in our meeting, I, at the very end, brought up how we had a incident in 2022 at the corner of Nelson and Hover, where a young man got shot after a impromptu racing sort of meetup. And my concern is that I'd like to know if we could get a general ballpark dollar amount of what the safety department spent just on that one incident in regards to having to, track down people, detectives, and everything else like that. Because that spot there has been kind of a blighted spot for a very long time, almost a decade. And we're covering that as a city. And I think we need to show the public what's just one instant runs, especially a serious one like that, so that we can talk to those folks and say, we're covering your security in that lot there. And I'd like to get a dollar amount. I realize that we really don't have a meeting until the 23rd of January. So I'm not asking for it to be immediate.
So, can I just add something? Do you want this,
Just information.
so, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll work with Public Safety Chief and staff in pulling that number.
Okay.
And then we may have to talk about what the immediate cost is versus the long term because
Right,
it keeps
right.
going, but we'll definitely have that information for you.
Yeah, I think people would be interested in seeing how much, public funds we're spending on a spot like that has sat there for a long time.
We'll also provide some adjustments that we made after the fact to try to manage those issues, and so I'll probably give you a little more depth to the response.
That
But
would
yeah,
be
we'll get that to
greatly
you.
appreciated. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I just also wanted to make sure we have a meeting, January 9th is our next meeting,
Oh,
so
okay.
I just didn't want you
Well-
to not show up.
No, no. I knew that. I just, I was looking at the calendar and it seemed like some of those, that might be, I didn't want to push our city staff.
Okay, Counselor Christ.
I just wanted to share, I had gone to a Christmas party that was a high-tech Christmas party, and I had individuals there from some of the same agencies we just discussed for the CHIPS program. Gentleman even came up from UCCS, and we talked about what it would take to do semiconductor manufacturing, and there is quite an on-ramp to it in terms of technology. There's a reason why Taiwan's been #1 for a while. So there will be some on-ramping that will be required, but it's important to get started. You have to start one foot in front of the other. But so it isn't going to be something that by next year we have a lot of people hired. We're still going to be aggregating the talent and the materials. But so I just wanted to share that because I had the advantage of talking with some of these individuals that David talked about. So,
Counselor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I wanted to just throw out there, if there was a chance at our retreat that we can have Aaron Fosdick to come and just talk about our partnership with them and how that benefits the city when we make these decisions with these corporations. And like today, we talked about CHIP. That's just, I mean, I know we're going to talk about that later on, but I just want to suggest that if we can have her to come in at the retreat just to talk a little bit more about our partnership with them so that we all can have a clear understanding of what that means and what that looks like moving forward, especially since she's new in that in that position. Second of all, have we ever thrown a holiday party together as council? Ever?
Can we do that in the Sunshine Law?
I mean, here or something? No? I don't know. I was
Not that
just.
I'm aware of.
Huh? No?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I think. Oh, okay. Well, I just thought about that and I just wanted to ask that question maybe one day in the future. Okay, thanks.
Counselor Martin.
Thank you. I actually, because we discussed the CHIPS Act and a CHIPS zone today, wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to Front Range Community College because they have been very visionary in terms of training technicians in two-year programs, and I think some even shorter in certifications, although I'm not, somebody say yes about that, yeah. And the good side of that is that means that they are already providing people who are credentialed in electronics and advanced manufacturing and some of the very persons that we need to be hired early on as we get semiconductor expansion that we hope for. They're training at the specifications of already local companies like Seagate that can benefit from this. And so what I have heard from numerous stakeholders in the EDP is that there is more of a need actually for technicians than four-year degreed and advanced degreed engineers. So we we are really already producing people who can be hired into this expansion that we hope for.
City manager remarks.
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney.
No comments, Mayor?
Can I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.